Professor Arnold Zellner, distinguished speakers and invitees, and dear participants. Well, as you have perhaps seen on the program schedule, we have been propagating it pays to go Bays. And that essentially is the motto and the main theme of this workshop. Throughout the world, in the last 50 years, there have been so many developments, new techniques for data mining, data analysis, econometric modeling, forecasting. The Bayesian methods have been in the forefront of research throughout the world. It looks as if in India, we were a little bit slow. We were left behind. And of course, as you all know, the tradition of Indian Statistical Institute, which is a unique university by itself in the world, it's a statistical university. The whole institute created around statistics, which has been serving as the fountainhead for the entire research. Well, it's only befitting that Indian Statistical Institute takes the lead in holding an instructional program for the motivation as well as educating the Indian researcher, applied statistician, applied economists, corporate strategists, risk managers, business and financial analysts, and forecasters. Well, that's essentially is the main purpose of this program that we have. And it's my very great pleasure and my honor that for this program, we have some of the grand masters of this subject from all over the world who have kindly acceded to our request and have in fact arrived in Bangalore at the ISI campus. Well, let me welcome our very special guest, Professor Arnold Zellner, who is really the father of Bayesian econometrics. Very warm welcome to you. May I request my colleague, Dr. Nivedita Das, to offer the flowers to Professor Zellner. Here they are. That's fine. It's a little bit long walk. Thank you, Professor Zellner. Very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Professor Zellner also happens to be my grand guru, academic grand guru. Now it's the turn to introduce my guru, who is a household name, a well-known name among the econometricians. I don't think you would have studied statistics or econometrics without reading more than a dozen books by Professor Griffiths, Professor Griffiths. Well, we have a galaxy of distinguished Bayesians here. I think the Bayesians in Bangalore, it's going to be remembered for a long, long time. We have very renowned speakers, renowned Bayesians, author of several books, people who have actually introduced this subject, taken into new dimensions. We have here Professor Prem Goel from Ohio State University, Columbus, Ohio. Well, we also have a very special visitor. I hope he's Professor Polasek. Oh yes. Well, someone who really made it to the conference. Very distinguished speaker, Professor Polasek. He's from University of Basel, Switzerland. I'm really glad that you are here. You could make it. And of course, among the speakers, we also will have, toward the later part of the program, our very own Professor K Ghosh, Jawaharlal Nehru Professor at Indian Statistical Institute, who will be joining us on the 13th of January, as he is right now occupied at Calcutta with another conference, but Professor K Ghosh will be here. And of course, among the other distinguished Bayesians who would be giving lectures, we have Professor V.K. Chetty, who was a student of Professor Zellner. One of the very first PhD theses in econometrics which were done at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Am I right, Chetty? Professor Chetty was a student. He'll be giving lectures. And of course, we have a few fillers here and there. I will pitch in, and of course, my colleague, Dr. Mohan Delampari, would also be speaking. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the participants who are here and the ones who are going to be the beneficiaries of this program. We have research students, junior faculty from colleges and universities all over India, right from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, as this we would describe. We have people here from the corporate sector. We have people participation here from Hindustan Levers, IBM, GE Card Services, and we have people who are working for the Federal Reserve Bank, which we call the Reserve Bank of India. And of course, I hope I have not missed out. And people who are working with the corporate sector, financial strategists. We have people from state SBI guilds. I hope I haven't left out anything. But we really have a wide spectrum of participants here, from the academics to the industry. This is what is the main objective, that we really popularize this program into all fields of whether it's theory or its application. Well, I also have to talk about the sponsors of this program. Well, of course, ISI, in its own tradition, has taken the lead in providing some seed fund, which of course is quite large, the seed fund. But of course, we wanted to have the benefit of the visits of such distinguished speakers and the lectures to all the participants throughout India. We wanted to accommodate as many people as possible. We approached, of course, Professor Arnold Zellner. I didn't read out all his titles. As you know, he's the founder, president of International Society for Bayesian Analysis. He's also the president of Professor Leonard G. Savage Memorial Fund, and of course several other titles which go along with him. And if he realized, Professor Zellner, well, I think I shared my passion with him, and I told him that we have to educate Indian researchers, econometricians, statisticians about this, we call as the Bayesian methods. And of course, he was ever willing to help. And of course, a large amount of funds came in from the Savage Memorial Funds. Professor Zellner's generosity, we are able to hold this program. And of course, anyone I approached never really turned down an offer, although it was a very new thing for them, particularly when I approached IBM and the GE. In fact, the president of IBM mentioned that at IIT Kanpur, they teach almost everything. How come he never heard about the Bayesian method? I said, well, this is the time, and of course we would like, when you are having the program on data mining analysts, when you're trying to develop the business intelligence solutions, and I think you can't have it without knowing about the Bayesian methods. And of course, GE Card Services, who are based here for the research and who are involved with the econometric modeling for the financial sector, they have also sponsored. Central Statistical Organization is another sponsor for this program. There are two highlights of this program. I should make it very quick. One of them is that, as you can see through the program, we have named sessions of honoring distinguished Bayesian. The purpose is that each speaker will also introduce about the work of these distinguished Bayesians who have in fact brought this subject to where it stands today. And the second part, the second highlight is, well, it was on the suggestion of Professor Zellner, which of course was taken up, immediately accepted, that we videotape the entire workshop lectures. The idea is that we should be able to put it on the VCDs and make it available to the libraries all over the world. Well, that's really a passion, to make sure that the Bayesian methods reach every nook and corner of this world. Well, now that the scientific program was planned, and we have such great luminaries of the subject arriving here for the first time, Bangalore, to instruct our Indian researchers and students. It was a difficult task, but we had to find a distinguished policymaker and a policy planner to chair this inaugural session. As you all know, Honorable Shri Satish Chandran is the former governor of Goa. He was also the principal secretary to the Prime Minister of India. He was the Chief Secretary, Government of Karnataka, Energy Secretary, Government of India, and the former Director of Institute for Social and Economic Change. I'm sure I have missed out lots of other distinguished positions where he has been involved with policy planning for Karnataka as well as for the country. And given that we were really trying to have this program, which is as it's called applied Bayesian methods, and it was only befitting that we have someone as distinguished as Shri T.R. Satish Chandran, and of course I'm much obliged that he kindly agreed to chair this inaugural session. And may I request my colleague Dr. Nivedita Das to offer flowers too. And a very warm welcome to Honorable Shri Satish Chandran. Now I would like to request Honorable Shri T.R. Satish Chandran to kindly chair the inaugural session. I would also request you to give us the inaugural address and conduct the proceedings of this morning session. Sir, please.
Professor Zellner, Professor Surekha Rao, distinguished faculty of this workshop, and my dear participants. I am really honored to have been invited to chair this inaugural session of the workshop on applied Bayesian methods. And I am most grateful to Professor Surekha Rao for giving me this privilege. Indeed, I begged of her to excuse me because I felt rather nervous to stand before eminent Bayesians and to talk about a somewhat specialized area of statistics with which I have very little familiarity. Indeed, I told her I do not want my ignorance to be discovered, and I would rather like to be excused, but she was so persuasive that I am here before you to make a few stray comments. Indeed, I must congratulate the Bangalore Center of the Indian Statistical Institute for making this effort to introduce a new statistical approach to Indian economists and statisticians. In any country, one of the prime responsibilities of the government is to formulate and implement coherent economic policies which are conducive to the economic advancement of the country and improvement in the well-being of the people. And policy making is even more important for a developing country like India, where we still have pervasive poverty and we still have a long way to travel in terms of improvement in the levels of living of the people. And even more so, since India also has now, since 1991, become a partner in the process of globalization, and in a phased manner, the Indian economy is getting integrated with the global economy, which makes it very imperative that we develop our policy-making skills in such a fashion that not only does the country grow, but the transition to a market economy, which is globally competitive, is smooth and efficient. Indeed, economic policy making inevitably demands, and we have been making use of econometrics in some fairly extensive fashion in this country, thanks to the leadership provided by the Indian Statistical Institute, which probably has trained most of the statisticians in the country. Because you need econometrics to give empirical content to economic relations. As in any country, in the governmental structure here in India also, we do collect a mass of data at various levels. Not that the quality of data is always very good and reliable, but we do collect a tremendous amount of data. And if we are to draw any meaningful collection, if we are to have any kind of a meaningful explanation for which we can draw from this data, we certainly need the help and guidance of a theoretical framework. And this is where econometrics comes in very prominently, because it provides a synergy between economic theory, mathematics, and statistics. only say that in looking at the strength of econometrics and its utility as a tool in policy making, I may be forgiven if I were to say that at least in some of the current economic journals which I have occasion to browse through, I see a lot of sophisticated mathematical techniques, but very little in the shape of policy leads. And I have a feeling that many of the scholars are tempted to demonstrate their knowledge of mathematics than to utilize it for application to the problems of life around us. But I'm sure with the kind of guidance which you are getting from this distinguished faculty, the participants in this workshop will see that there is really a proper unification of all of theory as well as the mathematical techniques in order to be of assistance in policy making. Any scholar who uses a mathematical tool to understand or analyze a problem must certainly have an understanding of the problem. He must have a prior understanding of the problem. He must have a fairly good insight into the interlinkages, into the relationships, causalities, and so on. And therefore, any methodology which he chooses to analyze or any mathematical technique which he adopts is bound to be influenced by his prior knowledge. If he proposes to draw any kind of a quantitative relationship, to establish any kind of quantitative relationship, or to go in for any kind of econometric modeling, certainly his prior knowledge does come in. And the more mature the scholar, the better, the sounder would be his choice of technique. And it is here that I understand that the Bayesian method comes in extremely, is a very valuable instrument because it provides for the use of prior knowledge and information in a logically consistent manner. This, I take it, is the main purpose of this workshop, to impart knowledge as to how the Bayesian method can be utilized to improve testing of hypotheses, drawing of inferences, evaluation of models, and forecasting. I see the value of this workshop, therefore, not so much for its theoretical interest, but the fact that the focus is on applications. Applications to the economic world around us, especially to assist in policy making by evaluation of different options available, to assist in the design of response strategies to anticipated outcomes, which would help private business and industry also, and in general to improve economic efficiency. Now, if I may, I have, as Professor Surekha Rao mentioned, I happen to have been involved for a good part of my life in policy making at both the state and the Government of India levels. And I would like to place before you a few stray thoughts as a layman on areas where possibly the Bayesian method will be of great help and value. Now, in general in India, there is often a criticism which is voiced that public policy making takes place essentially in an ad hoc fashion, and that there is a lack of systematic and thorough analysis which precedes policy making. Maybe to some extent this is true. If we look around, we find that in some areas we do employ sophisticated econometric methods. If you look at our 5-year planning, the theoretical underpinning of our 5-year plans, of course currently planning is a little out of fashion, but last 40 or 45 years, we have been operating our economic system under the 5-year plans. And as many of you are aware, our 5-year plans have been based on advanced work on a theoretical basis, with a macroeconomic model, with a whole series of submodels, input-output tables, and whatnot. Of course, if the plans, if we could not achieve the objectives in our successive plans fully, that's for a different reason. But the point I am emphasizing is that we do have at least sectors of policy making where some of these techniques have been adopted, though mostly they are the classical techniques, not the Bayesian techniques. But there are many other areas where the use of knowledge available, whether in mathematics or statistics, for purposes of policy making is rather limited. But one of the constraints, and probably one of the explanations for this, is the fact that we have inadequate data in a variety of areas. Though over the last 40 or 50 years, there has been a steady improvement in compiling data of various kinds, there are still many areas where we do not have reliable and adequate data, which can be made use of by for statistical applications. If I may give an example or two, if you look at even basic economic parameters which are of importance to a poor developing country like India, like poverty, unemployment, or income inequality, which are certainly the core of whatever economic strategies because alleviation of poverty or equity in society, these are the basic objectives of any of the country's policy. But we see here, even here, that we have problems of various kinds. Most of you would be aware of the fact that even today, we are not able to reconcile household expenditure data collected through the national sample surveys. Of course, the sample surveys technique itself is a very well-developed technique for which, again, the founder of the ISI and his successors can validly take credit. Its reconciliation with national income accounts is still an unresolved problem. And I believe, and for that matter, even our estimate of gross domestic product, when we see the Central Statistical Organization revising the figures almost every 6 months, you really start worrying what's happening. Of course, one explanation is that we still have a very large unorganized sector of economic activity. But whatever it is, I believe this is one of the areas where the Bayesian method has application because estimation of gross domestic product, Professor Zellner has been a pioneer in this kind of work, and I'm sure we will all benefit from his presence in improving our ability to estimate future or likely changes in the GDP or the gross national product in the years to come. Let me place before you another kind of problem in an area which is a little more, with which I have a little more association. This is in regard to energy demand forecasting. We have seen from past experience that we have not been able to apply econometric methods for energy demand forecasting. And this is for a slightly different kind of reason. For 40 years or more, we have had a system of administered prices and supply shortages. So if you ask me, how do you estimate income elasticity or price elasticity with Indian data, you're totally at a loss. You just don't have any idea what kind of response the consumer would have if we were to raise, say, petroleum prices or electricity prices by 10% or 15%. And this is an area where, which is highly capital intensive. The investments have a long lead time to fructify, and yet we are still sort of fumbling along with all kinds of approximations. You take even our crop estimates, and after all, India is basically an agricultural country, and 1/3 of our national income is still accounted for by the agriculture sector. Here also, as many of you may be aware, the crop forecasting methods have improved over a period of time. Statistical techniques are being adopted, but we still have a situation where until very close to the harvest, we really do not have a fairly precise idea of what the likely production would be. And these estimates are very important if we are to have a proper import policy, have a proper buffer stock policy so that the food grain distribution system works in a methodical fashion. I believe that in all these areas, the Bayesian method has relevance and something to contribute. Of course, it's also necessary that we simultaneously improve our data collection, the validation of data, and develop adequate databases in many of these areas of critical importance to the Indian economy. There is another, I am speaking only by reading some literature, so not that I claim to have any personal knowledge, but it was very interesting to see that the Bayesian method can be applied to analyze business cycles, when there will be a downturn or an upturn, to analyze the behavior of stock prices and so on. Certainly this would be of great interest to investors, business firms, industries, and even to government, because its government revenue depends on how the economy behaves. I would only say that the Indian stock market, its behavior has been so baffling that I am sure it will baffle even the most eminent Bayesians present here. It's been operated so much by the speculative elements that no one has been able to establish any kind of a correlation between the trends in stock market prices and any other explanatory variables. But I do hope that thanks to this workshop, we will have some way of anticipating how the stock markets will behave. I may mention for your information that only a couple of months ago, the Indian Parliament has passed a law which permits trading in derivatives. And trading in derivatives is essentially a trading in risk. And if one goes by what happened to firms like the long-term capital management hedge fund, with which very eminent Nobel laureate winning scholars were associated, one really gets a little uneasy as to where we are heading. But I once again express the confidence that with the kind of techniques which are being developed, which are going to be explained in the workshop during the next few days, hedging of risk will become a much more reliable proposition in our country than has been the case so far. Now, only one more area I'll touch and I'll conclude. This is again an area in which I have some, you may say, personal interest, but I saw a reference that the Bayesian method has also application to phenomena which operate under great uncertainty, like global warming. Now, this is something which is of concern to all citizens all around the world. There is a great deal of controversy about the probability and the extent to which this phenomenon may occur. Partly this is because our own knowledge of climate science is still very imperfect, and scientists are themselves highly divided as to what are the factors which influence climate. But whatever it is, the best estimate which is available now, and this is from a very high-level international body called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which gave two reports, the first in 1990 and the second in 1996. Their forecast is that by the year 2100, the global mean surface temperature may rise by about 2 degrees Celsius. But the probability range is from 1 degree to 3.5 degrees. That the level of the seas may rise by 50 centimeters. And here the probability range is 10 to 95 centimeters. Now this is not a very helpful forecast, because the impact, if you take the two limits of the probability range, will vary tremendously. But I have no doubt that the scholars in this field will help in in a forecast with a much narrower probability range, which will certainly help the countries around the world to design programs which to some extent minimize the impact of climate change. Now, I really do not want to take more of your time. As a layman, I have placed before you a few unconnected thoughts. I'd like to make only one comment before I conclude, namely that from my knowledge of the university system in India, I get the feeling that, with the exception of a few universities, in most universities, especially the older ones in the country, the teaching of economics, whether at the, as we call in India, the graduate and the postgraduate level, it is still weak in its content as far as statistical or mathematical or quantitative methods are concerned. Now, here you are discussing a subject which is a highly specialized branch of statistics. But if you expect to see wide-scale applications of such techniques, to my mind, the teaching community in the universities must certainly give greater thought to strengthening the capability of students who are learning economics to apply mathematical and statistical techniques. I make this comment, as I said, as a layman. Let me conclude by saying that the workshop which has been organized is very timely. It brings into India, tries to popularize a new approach in statistics which promises to have application in a variety of areas, and it's indeed gratifying that the leaders, the academic stalwarts in this area are all present here to share their knowledge and train the younger generation in this area. I once again thank Professor Surekha Rao, and I have no doubt that this workshop will be tremendously valuable and useful. Thank you very much.